"Sir, check it again," warned the little girl as the mafia boss nearly signed the trap contract. Harbor City was not a place that forgave weakness. It was a sprawling, industrial beast of steel and salt water, where the fog rolled in off the Atlantic thick enough to choke the streetlights. From the 45th floor of the Marino Logistics Tower, Dante Marino looked down at the city he ruled to the public. He was a logistics mogul, a man who moved freight across the eastern seaboard with ruthless efficiency to the streets. He was the ghost in the machine, the disciplined and feared head of a criminal empire that had run the docks for 3 generations. But Dante was tired. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke charcoal suit, turning away from the rain-lashed window. He was 35 years old, but his eyes carried the weight of a man twice that age. They were dark, calculating eyes that missed nothing and revealed even less. Today was supposed to be the turning point. Today was the day he signed the contract that would wash his money clean, burying the blood of the past under the concrete foundation of legitimate real estate. His consigliere, an older man named Frank who wore suits that cost more than most people's cars, stood by the heavy oak conference table. "Everything is ready." "Dante," Frank said, his voice low and gravelly. "The representatives from the Hale Group are in the lobby. This is it. The buy-in is $50 million. Once you sign, we are officially partners in the largest commercial development project in the state. No more looking over your shoulder at the feds." Dante walked to the head of the table. He ran a hand over the leather chair back. It felt cold. He had spent 10 years legitimizing the family business, cutting ties with the violent drug trades, focusing on unions and transport. This deal with the Hale Group was the final lock. Victor Hale ran a prestigious investment firm. If Hale was vouching for Dante, the world would accept him. "Send them in," Dante said. While Dante prepared to sign away his past, Maya Collins was fighting a war in the lobby. She was 26, a junior associate at the prestigious law firm of Sterling Vance, and currently, she was on the verge of a panic attack. Maya checked her watch. It was 2:00. She was supposed to be the second chair for the contract signing, a glorified paper pusher there to hand over documents and look professional. But standing next to her, clutching a worn-out pink backpack and a sketchbook, was her 8-year-old daughter. "Sophia, I am so sorry, baby," Maya whispered, crouching down to straighten Sophia's collar. "Mrs." Higgins called and said her pipe burst. "I had no one else to call." Sophia looked up with wide, intelligent eyes. She adjusted her glasses, which were slightly too big for her small face. "It is okay. Mom, I will be quiet. I promise." Maya felt a knot of guilt tighten in her stomach. She needed this job. As a single mother with student loans that felt like a mountain on her shoulders, she could not afford to upset the senior partners. But dragging a child to a high-stakes meeting with a client as notoriously icy as Dante Marino was professional suicide. The elevator chimed. One of the senior partners, a sweating man named Mr. Henderson, waved frantically at her. "Collins, let us go," Henderson snapped. "We are late. Why is the child here?" Maya swallowed hard, guiding Sophia into the elevator. "Emergency. Sir, she will be invisible. I swear." The ride-up was silent and suffocating. When the doors opened on the 45th floor, the air felt different. It was cooler, smelling of expensive leather and rain. They were ushered into the conference room, a cavernous space dominated by a long table, and the man standing at the head of it. Dante Marino was more imposing than his photographs. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained the fabric of his suit. His hair was black, swept back from a face defined by sharp, angular lines and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. When he turned his gaze on them, Maya felt the air leave her lungs. He radiated a dangerous kind of power, a controlled intensity that made the hair on her arms stand up. Dante's eyes swept over the team of lawyers, unimpressed, until they landed on the small figure standing by Maya's leg. He paused. His eyebrows drew together in a frown that was not quite anger, but close enough to make Mr. Henderson tremble. "There is a child in my conference room," Dante stated. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth and cold. Maya stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. She placed a protective hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Mr. Marino." "I apologize," Maya said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "My childcare canceled 10 minutes ago. Sophia will sit in the corner and draw. You will not hear a peep from her. I have the addendums for the liability clauses right here." Dante stared at her. He looked at the flushed cheeks of the young woman, the fraying strap of her briefcase, and the fierce, protective grip she had on the girl. Then he looked at Sophia. The girl did not shrink away. She held her sketchbook to her chest and looked right back at him with solemn curiosity. For a second, the corner of Dante's mouth twitched. He saw the resemblance instantly. The mother had the same stubborn chin as the daughter. "Fine," Dante said, waving a hand toward a leather armchair in the far corner. "Sit. Do not touch anything glass." "Thank you, sir," Sophia said politely. She marched to the chair, climbed up, and opened her book. Dante sat down, signaling for the meeting to begin. The atmosphere was tense. The lawyers from Sterling Vance were nervous, shuffling papers and clearing their throats. They laid the contract out on the table. It was thick. Over 100 pages of dense legal jargon. "Mr. Marino?" Henderson began, his voice shaky. "As we discussed, this agreement solidifies your 50% stake in the waterfront revitalization project. The Hale Group is eager to move forward. We just need your signature on the final page." Dante leaned back, his face unreadable. He had read the drafts. He knew the numbers. $50 million in a projected $200 million out over 10 years. It was clean. It was safe. Or at least, that was what he paid these lawyers to ensure. He began to flip through the document, pretending to skim. In truth, his mind was wandering. He kept glancing toward the corner. The little girl, Sophia, was drawing with intense concentration. Every few minutes, she would look up, study the room, and then go back to her paper. Then Dante's gaze would slide to Maya. She was standing behind Henderson, passing him files. She looked exhausted, but she moved with a quiet grace that intrigued him. She was beautiful in an understated way, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that could not quite contain a few loose curls framing her face. She was clearly the smartest person on her side of the table, anticipating which document Henderson needed before the man even asked. "Are there any changes from the draft I saw on Tuesday?" Dante asked, cutting through Henderson's rambling explanation of tax codes. "No, sir," Henderson said quickly. "Identical. Just formatted for signature." Maya shifted her weight. She felt a prickle of unease. She'd not been part of the final drafting team. She'd only seen the earlier versions, but something about Henderson's sweating upper lip bothered her. She glanced at the document upside down on the table. The font looked standard, the clauses familiar. She told herself she was being paranoid. She was just a junior associate. These were senior partners. They knew what they were doing. Dante reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a heavy fountain pen. He uncapped it. The room went silent. The only sound was the scratching of Sophia's pencil in the corner. "Let us get this over with," Dante muttered. He flipped to the final page. The signature line waited for him. Maya watched him. She wanted to say something, to ask for 5 minutes to review the final copy herself, but she bit her tongue. She could not undermine her boss in front of a client like Marino. She needed this paycheck. She needed to pay for Sophia's braces and the rent. Dante lowered the pen to the paper. The ink tip hovered millimeters from the line. Suddenly, a small voice cut through the silence. "Sir, check it again." Dante froze. The pen did not move. He slowly lifted his head. In the corner, Sophia had lowered her sketchbook. She was looking at the contract on the table, her expression puzzled. Henderson turned purple. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. She rushed forward, grabbing Sophia's hand. "Sophia, hush, I told you to be quiet." The girl did not back down. She pointed a small finger at the document. "The pictures do not match." "Mom?" Dante raised a hand, silencing Maya. He turned his chair slowly to face the child. His expression was no longer bored. It was sharp, like a blade drawn from a sheath. "What did you say?" Dante asked softly. Sophia swallowed, intimidated by the big man but stubborn in her observation. She pointed to the open document in front of Dante. The picture. The logo. On the first page, the bird is looking left. On the last page, the bird is looking right. It is not the same company. The room went deathly still. It was the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. Dante looked down. He flipped the contract to the front cover. The logo for the Hale Group featured a stylized eagle facing west, towards the left. He flipped to the final signature page, the one Henderson had practically pushed under his hand. There, in the watermark at the bottom of the page, the eagle was facing east. It was a different letterhead. Dante's eyes narrowed. He looked closely at the text above the signature line. It was not the Hale Group Investment LLC. It was the Hale Global Holdings, Inc. A subtle change, a difference of 2 words. But in the world of law and crime, it was the difference between a partnership and a death sentence. Dante began to read the fine print on the last page. Really read it this time. His eyes scanned the dense paragraphs about arbitration and jurisdiction. He stopped. His knuckle turned white as he gripped the pen. Clause 84, subsection C. Dante read aloud. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated in the chest of everyone in the room. In the event of federal investigation, the signee agrees to assume full personal liability for all pre-existing debts and assets of the holding entity. He looked up at Henderson. The lawyer was shaking so badly he dropped his pen. It was a trap. They were not selling him a stake in a development project. They were trying to get him to sign a contract with a shell company loaded with toxic assets and flagged for federal seizure. If he signed this, he would not be buying a business. He would be signing a confession that transferred all of the Hale Group's dirty laundry onto his name. Victor Hale was trying to frame him. Hale was going to hand Dante's entire empire over to the authorities and keep Dante's $50 million as a fee. Dante stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Get out," Dante said. "Mr. Marino, please. There must be a mistake." Henderson stammered. "Backing away. I said get out," Dante roared. The sound was terrifying. A release of the violence he kept tightly leashed. "Before I throw you out the window." The lawyers scrambled. Briefcases were snatched up. Papers flew. Henderson practically ran for the door. Maya stood frozen, clutching Sophia's hand. She was horrified. She looked at the contract, then at Dante's furious face. She turned to leave, pulling Sophia with her, terrified that the wrath would fall on them next. "Not you," Dante barked. Maya stopped in the doorway. She turned slowly. Dante was standing by the window again, his chest heaving as he fought to regain his composure. He stared at the two of them. "You stay," Dante said. His voice had dropped back to that icy, controlled register. Maya felt her knees tremble. She looked down at Sophia, who was hugging her sketchbook, looking worried. "Sir, I had nothing to do with this," Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. Dante walked over to the table. He picked up the contract and threw it into the trash can with a violent thud. Then he looked at the little girl. The anger in his eyes softened. Just a fraction. He nodded to her. A rare, almost gentle acknowledgement. "You have good eyes, little one," Dante said. "You just saved my life." Sophia blinked behind her glasses. "You are welcome, sir." Dante turned his gaze to Maya. It was intense, searching, and filled with a dark suspicion that made her shiver. "Sit down, Miss Collins," Dante commanded. "We need to talk about who exactly prepared that document. And if you lie to me, not even your daughter will be enough to stop what happens next." Maya sat. She pulled Sophia onto her lap, wrapping her arms around the girl as if she were a shield. "I did not know," Maya said, tears of fear welling in her eyes. "Please, you have to believe me. I just checked the grammar. I do not draft the corporate structures." Dante walked around the table until he was standing right in front of her. He leaned down, placing his hands on the arms of her chair, boxing her in. He smelled of expensive cologne and danger. He looked deep into her eyes, looking for the flicker of deceit he had seen in so many men before. But all he saw was terror, and beneath the terror, a fierce resolve to protect the child in her arms. He studied her face, the tears spilling over her lashes, the way her pulse jumped in her throat. "Who is Victor Hale to you?" Dante asked quietly. "Nothing," Maya whispered. "I have never met him. I am just a junior associate. They just brought me in today because the other attorney was sick." Dante held her gaze for a long moment. He wanted to believe her. His instincts, usually flawless, told him she was telling the truth, but his survival depended on paranoia. "My men are going to tear that contract apart," Dante said, straightening up. "And while they do, you are going to stay right here, because if you are innocent, Miss Collins, then you are the only honest lawyer I have met in 20 years. But if you are working for Hale..." He let the threat hang in the air. Maya nodded, clutching Sophia tighter. She understood. She was a hostage now. Dante walked back to his desk and pressed the intercom button. "Frank, lock down the elevators. No one leaves. And get me the security tapes from the lobby. I want to know who Henderson was talking to before he came up here." He released the button and looked back at the woman and the child in the corner of his vast, cold office. The rain hammered against the glass, isolating them from the world below. For the first time in years, Dante Marino felt the ground shifting under his feet. The enemy was inside the gates, and the only people he could maybe trust were a trembling woman with no money and a little girl who liked to draw birds. He sat down in his leather chair and watched them. "Tell me." "Miss Collins," Dante said, his voice dropping the aggression, shifting into something more inquisitive. "Why did you bring her? Why risk your job?" Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to regain some shred of dignity. "Because she is my daughter," Maya said, her voice shaking but clear, "and I do not leave her behind. Not for anyone." Dante was silent. He looked at the drawing on the table where Sophia had been sitting. It was a sketch of him. He looked sad in the picture. He looked back at Maya. The storm outside was getting worse, but the storm inside the room had just begun. "Stay put," Dante said. "It is going to be a long night." The rain had not stopped since the meeting ended. It battered the glass walls of the Marino Logistics headquarters, blurring the lights of Harbor City into smears of neon and gray. Inside his private office on the top floor, Dante Marino stood over a desk covered in scattered paperwork, his jacket discarded on a leather chair, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with tension. His financial team had been working for 4 hours straight. They were the best money launderers and forensic accountants money could buy. Men and women who could find a single missing cent in a ledger of billions. "What do we have?" Dante asked, his voice rough. Marcus, his lead analyst, looked up from a laptop, his face pale under the fluorescent task lighting. "The kid was right, boss," Marcus said, tapping the screen. "It was buried deep. The Hale Global Holdings, Inc. is a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. On the surface, it looks like a standard investment vehicle. But when we peeled back the layers of ownership, we found 3 more shell corps nesting inside it like Russian dolls. And at the bottom?" Dante asked, though he already suspected the answer. Marcus grimaced. "Victor Hale. And not just him. The arbitration clauses in the contract you almost signed are designed to trigger specifically upon the commencement of any federal investigation. Explain," Dante ordered. "If you had signed that contract," Marcus said, shifting his glasses, "you would have legally agreed that any government scrutiny into your finances constitutes a breach of faith. Under the terms, all assets managed by the partnership, meaning your entire logistics fleet and the waterfront property, would immediately be placed in a blind trust controlled by the senior partner." Dante's eyes went cold. "Controlled by Hale." "Exactly." Marcus nodded. "He was not trying to buy you out, Dante. He was trying to set you up. The plan was likely to have you sign, tip off the FBI anonymously about your old accounts, trigger the investigation, and then legally steal your entire legitimate business while you were busy fighting federal indictments. He would have stripped you clean and left you to rot in prison." Dante turned away, walking to the window. The city looked different now. It looked like a chessboard where he had almost lost his queen because he was too focused on protecting his king. Victor Hale had played a long game, but there was one loose end. The lawyer. "Is she part of it?" Dante asked, staring at his reflection in the dark glass. "We do not know," Marcus admitted. "Her background is clean. Single mother, law school scholarship, debt, no known criminal connections. But she brought the contract. She was in the room. Bring her in," Dante said. "Not to the office. Bring her to the penthouse. I want to look her in the eye when I ask her why she nearly buried me." Maya Collins was sitting on her living room floor in a small, drafty apartment 3 miles away, trying to convince Sophia to eat a grilled cheese sandwich. Her hands were still shaking from the encounter at the office earlier that day. She had expected to be fired the moment they left the building, but instead, she had been sent home with a cryptic instruction to keep her phone on. When the phone finally rang at 8 in the evening, the caller ID was blocked. "Miss Collins," a deep voice said. It was not Dante, but one of his men. "A car is outside. Mr. Marino requires clarification on the documents. Bring the files you have." "I can't," Maya stammered, standing up and looking frantically at Sophia. "Who was watching cartoons? I have my daughter. It is late. I cannot just leave her." The voice on the other end was uncompromising. "Bring the girl, Mr. Marino insists." Maya felt a trap closing around her. She had no choice. If Dante Marino was who the rumors said he was, refusing him was not an option. 10 minutes later, she was buckling a sleepy Sophia into the back of a black SUV that idled at her curb like a hearse. The ride to Dante's penthouse was silent. The driver offered no conversation, and Maya spent the time gripping Sophia's hand, whispering that they were just going on a late-night field trip. The penthouse was located at the pinnacle of a separate residential tower, a fortress of steel and glass that overlooked the harbor. The elevator opened directly into a living space that was larger than Maya's entire apartment building. The floors were polished concrete. The furniture was low and Italian leather, and the art on the walls looked like originals that belonged in a museum. It was beautiful, but it was cold. It lacked the warmth of a home. Dante was waiting for them by a fireplace that crackled with gas flames. He had changed into a black dress shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, which made him look less like a CEO and more like the predator he was reputed to be. "Thank you for coming," Dante said, his tone leaving no room for polite refusal. Maya stepped out of the elevator, holding Sophia's hand tightly. Sophia, clutching her pink backpack, looked around with wide eyes. "Wow," Sophia whispered. "You live in the sky." Dante looked at the child, and the hard line of his mouth softened imperceptibly. He walked over to them, not closing the distance enough to be threatening, but close enough that Maya could smell soap and cedar wood. "I do," Dante replied to the girl, "but it gets lonely up here." He looked at Maya, his eyes hardening again as they met hers. "We have work to do, Miss Collins, but first—" He gestured to a woman in a gray uniform who had appeared silently from a hallway. "This is Martha, my housekeeper. She has prepared the media room. It has a television, blankets, and I believe she baked cookies an hour ago." Maya hesitated, her instinct screaming not to separate from her child. Dante saw the fear and leaned in slightly, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "She's safer in the media room than she is standing next to you while we discuss what I found in that contract. Maya, I am not a monster. She will be treated like a princess." Maya looked at Martha, who offered a warm, grandmotherly smile. Then she looked at Sophia. "Go with the nice lady. Sophie," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly. "Mommy just has to work for a little bit. Eat some cookies for me." "Okay," Sophia chirped, the promise of sugar outweighing the strangeness of the situation. As Sophia skipped away, the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The air grew heavy. Dante turned his back on Maya and walked toward a massive mahogany table near the balcony doors. It was covered in stacks of paper. The contract. "Sit," Dante commanded. Maya sat. She felt small in the oversized leather chair. "My team found the shell companies," Dante said without preamble. He picked up a page and slid it across the table to her. "They found the arbitration trap. Hell wants to strip me of everything, now. I need to know one thing, Maya, and if you lie to me, I will know." He placed both hands on the table and leaned down, his face inches from hers, his dark eyes bored into her, searching for a crack in her armor. Did you know?" Maya shook her head frantically. "No, I swear to you, I swear on my daughter's life. I thought it was a standard investment deal. I did not even see the final exhibits until we were in the room." Dante studied her. He saw the pulse fluttering in her neck, the genuine terror in her dilated pupils. He breathed out slowly, standing up straight. "I believe you," he said. "Which means you were a pawn, just like me." He walked around the table and pulled a chair next to hers, too close. He sat down, his broad shoulder brushing against her arm as he leaned in. "Show me what else they buried," Dante said, his voice low and intense. "If you're as smart as I think you are, you can find the rest of the poison in these pages. For the next 3 hours, they worked." The penthouse was silent except for the rustle of paper and the rain against the glass. Maya, fueled by adrenaline and the desperate need to prove her innocence, went through the contract line by line. Dante stayed right beside her. It was an intimate, suffocating proximity. Maya was hyper-aware of him. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. Every time he pointed to a clause, his arm would brush hers, sending a jolt of electricity through her that she hated herself for feeling. He was a criminal. He was dangerous. But he was also brilliant. His mind catching up to the legal complexities faster than she expected. "Here," Maya said, her finger trembling as she pointed to a paragraph on page 80. "Look at the definition of liquid assets. It includes your personal accounts, not just the company's. If they triggered the forfeiture, they would have taken your private accounts too. They wanted to leave you bankrupt." Dante leaned closer to read the text, his cheek almost grazing her temple. Maya held her breath. "And here," she continued, her voice breathless, "the cross-collateralization clause. It links the logistics company to the waterfront development. If the development fails, which it would, if Hale pulled the funding, the logistics company is automatically used as collateral to pay the debt." Dante swore softly. A harsh, guttural sound. "He was going to burn it all down," Dante murmured. He turned his head to look at her. His face was inches away. Maya froze. She could see the fatigue lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. For a moment, they were not a mob boss and a lawyer. They were two people standing in the wreckage of a betrayal, bound by the discovery of the truth. "You are good at this," Dante said softly. "I had to be," Maya whispered, "to survive law school." Dante's gaze dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second, then snapped back to her eyes. He pulled away, breaking the spell, the tension in his shoulders ratcheting back up. "It is enough," Dante said, standing up abruptly. "We have enough proof to bury the deal. But Hale will not take this lying down. If he went to this much trouble to frame me, he is desperate." He looked at the clock. It was past midnight. "I will take you home," Dante said. "Get the girl." The drive back to Maya's apartment was tense. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. Dante drove the SUV himself, with 2 security cars following close behind. Maya sat in the passenger seat, while Sophia slept soundly in the back, clutching a half-eaten bag of cookies. Dante's eyes flicked constantly to the rear-view mirror. He was tight, coiled like a spring. "We are almost there," Maya said, recognizing her street. Dante did not answer. He was watching a pair of headlights that had been steady behind them for the last 4 turns. "Hold on," Dante said, his voice calm but deadly serious. "What?" Maya asked. Suddenly, the headlights behind them flared. A sedan accelerated, swerving around the security car and gunning for the side of Dante's SUV. "Get down," Dante shouted, slamming his hand across Maya's chest to pin her to the seat as he yanked the steering wheel hard to the left. The SUV lurched, tires screaming against the wet asphalt. The sedan clipped their bumper, sending a shudder through the heavy frame of the vehicle. In the back, Sophia woke up with a scream. "Stay down, Sophia!" Maya yelled, twisting in her seat to reach for her daughter, terror flooding her veins. Dante's face was a mask of concentration. He floored the accelerator. The engine roared, a beast unleashed. He wove through the narrow streets of Harbor City with terrifying precision, running red lights, drifting around corners. The security cars behind them engaged the attackers. Maya heard the sickening crunch of metal on metal. followed by the distinctive pop, pop, pop of gunfire. "Oh my God," Maya gasped, covering her head. "They are shooting. Keep your head down," Dante ordered. He took a sharp right into an alleyway, scraping the side of the SUV against the brick wall, sparks flying past the window. He burst out onto the main avenue, putting distance between them and the ambush. He did not slow down until they were miles away, circling back toward the downtown skyline. Maya was shaking uncontrollably. She looked back. Sophia was crying, huddled on the floorboard where the force of the turn had thrown her. "It is okay, baby. It is okay," Maya sobbed, unbuckling her seatbelt to climb into the back and pull her daughter into her arms. "We cannot go to your apartment," Dante said, his voice grim. "They know where you live. If they tailed us, they were waiting for you to come home." He looked at Maya in the rearview mirror. His eyes were dark with fury and regret. "I am taking you back to the tower." The return to the penthouse was a blur of security protocols and armed men. By the time they were back in the safety of the 45th floor, Sophia had cried herself into exhaustion. Martha took the child to the guest bedroom, murmuring soothing words, leaving Maya alone in the vast living room. Maya stood by the glass wall, looking out at the city that had just tried to kill her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, shaking shock. Suddenly, loud voices erupted from the hallway. How did they know the route? A man shouted. It was Dante's voice, raw with anger. "We swept the cars." "Boss," another man yelled back. "It must be a leak in the advance team." "I want names," Dante roared. "I had a child in that car. If one hair on her head had been touched, I would have skinned you all alive." The violence in his voice, the sheer volume of it, snapped something inside Maya. Her chest tightened. The room started to spin. She could not breathe. It was a panic attack, swift and brutal. She gasped for air, clutching the back of a sofa, her knees giving way. The door to the hallway opened. Dante stormed in, still furious, but he stopped dead when he saw her. Maya was crumpled on the floor, hyperventilating, her hands clawing at her throat. "Maya," Dante said, the anger vanishing instantly. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. He knelt beside her, hesitating for a moment before placing his large, warm hands on her shoulders. "Maya, look at me," he commanded, his voice firm but gentle. "You are safe. Look at me. I can't breathe," she choked out, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, you can," Dante said. He pulled her up, guiding her toward the glass doors that led to the terrace. "Come on, fresh air." He slid the door open and led her out onto the balcony. The wind was cold, sharp with the scent of the ocean. It hit Maya's face, shocking her system. Dante maneuvered her so she was leaning against the railing, his body shielding her from the wind. He moved behind her, placing one steady, heavy palm flat against the small of her back. The heat of his hand seeped through her thin blouse, a grounding anchor in the storm of her panic. "Breathe with me," Dante murmured, his mouth close to her ear. "In, 1, 2, 3. Out. 1, 2, 3. Maya focused on his voice. It was deep, rhythmic. She focused on the warmth of his hand on her back. Slowly, the black spots in her vision cleared. Her heart rate began to slow. She slumped forward, exhausted, her forehead resting on her arms against the railing. Dante did not move his hand. He kept it there, rubbing slow, soothing circles against her spine. "I am sorry," Maya whispered, shivering. "Do not apologize," Dante said. His voice was rough with an emotion she could not place. "You just saw the ugly side of my world. You have every right to be terrified." Maya turned around slowly. They were standing inches apart in the shadows of the balcony. The city lights reflected in Dante's eyes, making them look like pools of obsidian. He looked tired, the weight of the night pressing down on him. But he also looked at her with a stark, naked vulnerability that took her breath away. She saw the man beneath the monster. She saw the protector who had driven like a madman to save her child. Dante looked down at her. He saw the tear tracks on her cheeks, the stubborn set of her jaw, the fear that she was fighting to control. She was the bravest thing he had ever seen. For a moment, the rest of the world fell away. The wind whipped her hair across her face. Without thinking, Dante reached out. His thumb brushed her cheek, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. The skin was soft, warm. Maya stopped breathing. She looked up at him, her lips slightly parted. The attraction that had sparked in the office flared now into a flame. She wanted to lean into his touch. She wanted him to close the distance. Dante's gaze dropped to her mouth. He swayed toward her, just an inch. The urge to kiss her, to taste the life in her, was overwhelming. Then he remembered who he was and who she was. He stepped back abruptly, his hand dropping to his side as if he had been burned. He shut the feeling down, his face closing up like a steel vault. "You cannot go home," Dante said, his voice flat and professional again. Maya blinked, the loss of his touch leaving her cold. "What?" "Hale knows you helped me," Dante said, turning to look out at the skyline. "He knows you found the trap. That makes you a liability to him, and a target." He turned back to her. "You and Sophia will stay here. I have a secure guest suite in the East Wing. It has its own kitchen, its own security. You will be safe." "I cannot live here." "Dante," Maya protested, though her voice lacked conviction. "I have a life. I have a job. You have a target on your back," Dante corrected. "And until I deal with Hale, this penthouse is the only place in Harbor City where I can guarantee your daughter wakes up tomorrow morning." Maya looked at him. She hated the loss of freedom. She hated that her life had been hijacked by a war she did not start. But she remembered the headlights in the rearview mirror. She remembered the sound of gunfire. She looked at the steel doors of the penthouse, behind which her daughter was sleeping safely. "Okay," Maya whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "We stay, but only for a while." Dante nodded. He looked at her one last time, his eyes lingering on her face, before he turned back to the glass doors. "For a while?" He agreed. But as he walked back into the warmth of the penthouse, leaving her for a moment in the cold night air, Dante Marino knew that a while might not be long enough. He was already dreading the day he would have to let her go. 3 days had passed since the ambush, and the penthouse at the top of the Marino Logistics Tower had transformed from a cold, sterile command center into a strange, high-altitude bunker. The silence that usually defined Dante Marino's life was gone, replaced by the soft hum of cartoons from the media room and the anxious pacing of a woman who felt like a caged bird. For Dante, the adjustment was jarring. He was a man of discipline and solitude. He lived his life in shades of gray and black, minimizing attachments because attachments were weaknesses that could be exploited. Yet, as he walked into his office on Thursday morning, he found a splash of color on his mahogany desk that stopped him cold. It was a piece of printer paper, the corner slightly crinkled. On it, drawn in waxy blue and red crayon, was a stick figure of a man. The figure was wearing a black square that was presumably a suit, and he was frowning. Next to the man was a very small, very round bird. Underneath the drawing, in careful, blocky letters, were the words, "Sir with suit." Dante stared at it. He should have been annoyed. This was his workspace, the nerve center of an empire that controlled half the shipping lanes on the eastern seaboard. But instead of sweeping it into the trash, he felt a strange, tight sensation in his chest. "Boss, we have the perimeter reports," a voice rumbled from the doorway. Dante looked up. It was Rocco, one of his oldest lieutenants, a man whose neck was wider than his head. Rocco stepped into the room, holding a tablet, but his eyes immediately flicked to the drawing on the desk. A slow, terrifying grin spread across his scarred face. "Sir with suit?" Rocco asked, his voice shaking with suppressed laughter. "You want me to frame that for you? Boss, maybe put it next to the Monet in the hall?" "Get out," Dante growled, though there was no real heat in it. Rocco chuckled as he set the tablet down. "The kid has got you pegged, Dante. You look exactly like that when the coffee runs out." Dante waited until Rocco left before he picked up the paper. He held it for a moment, looking at the frowning stick figure. It was an innocent observation from an 8-year-old girl who had seen through his armor in 5 minutes. He opened the top drawer of his desk, the one where he kept his gun and his passport, and slipped the drawing inside, placing it carefully on top of the steel barrel of his weapon. It was a stark reminder of the two worlds colliding in his home, the violence he lived by and the normalcy he secretly, desperately craved. Down the hall, in the room Dante had converted into a temporary operations center, Maya Collins was staring at a computer screen, her world crumbling for the second time that week. She was working with Marcus, Dante's chief forensic accountant. They had decrypted a server cache from the law firm, Sterling and Vance. Maya had spent the last 48 hours hoping, praying, that there had been a mistake. She wanted to believe that Henderson, the senior partner who had mentored her, had been coerced. She wanted to believe that her firm was a victim, just like she was. The email on the screen shattered that illusion. It was dated 2 weeks ago. From Henderson to Victor Hale. Subject: The Marino Matter. The body of the email was short and brutal. The contract is prepped. We have buried the arbitration clauses in the sub-addendums as requested. Do not worry about the junior associate. Miss Collins. She's ambitious and naive. She will present the documents and ask no questions. If things go south, she is a convenient signatory to take the fall. She is an expendable asset. Maya read the words expendable asset over and over again. Her stomach churned. She had worshipped these people. She had missed Sophia's school plays to work late for them. She had believed in the sanctity of the law, in the idea that she was part of a system that protected people. And to them, she was just ink on a page, a scapegoat. She stood up so abruptly her chair tipped over. "Maya?" Marcus asked, looking up from his keyboard. "I need air," she choked out. She stormed out of the operations room and into the main living area. She needed to scream, to break something, but she was trapped in a glass box 500 feet in the air. Dante was coming out of his office. He saw her face, the flush of rage on her cheeks, the tears standing in her eyes, and stopped. "What did you find?" Dante asked, his voice low. Maya marched up to him, stopping only inches away. She held up the printout she had snatched from the printer. "They knew," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "They all knew. Henderson, the partners. They sold me out. Dante. They were going to let me go to prison for fraud just to help Hale steal your money." Dante took the paper from her hand. He read it once, his expression impassive. "I told you," Dante said calmly. "Victor Hale does not leave loose ends." "You say it like it is normal," Maya shouted, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. "Like it is just business. These are lawyers. Dante, officers of the court. They swore an oath." Dante looked at her, his eyes hard. "And I swore an oath to my family," Dante countered. "But that does not mean I do not break legs when I have to. You are surprised because you think the law makes people good. It does not. Maya, it just makes them expensive." Maya stepped back, looking at him with a mixture of horror and frustration. "Do not compare yourself to them," she snapped. "You are a criminal. Everyone knows what you are. But they were supposed to be the good guys. I spent my whole life trying to get into that firm because I thought I could make a difference. And the whole time, I was just a pawn for a mob war." Dante's jaw tightened. He stepped into her space, his large frame casting a shadow over her. "Is that what you think this is? A mob war?" he asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think because I carry a gun and they carry briefcases, that I am the villain and they are the fallen angels. Wake up, Maya. The only difference between me and Henderson is that I look you in the eye before I take everything you have. He stabs you in the back and charges you an hourly rate for the privilege." "I hate this," Maya whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "I hate your world. I hate the violence. I hate that my daughter is in a room down the hall drawing pictures of bodyguards because we cannot go outside without getting shot at." Dante flinched. The mention of Sophia struck a nerve. He looked away, his jaw working. "I did not ask for this either." "Maya," Dante said, his voice rougher now, "you think I want you here? You think I want to worry about a civilian and a child while I am trying to stop a shark like Hale from swallowing my life's work? You are a liability. Then let us go, Maya challenged, tears finally spilling over. I can't, Dante roared back, losing his composure for the first time, because if you walk out that door, you are dead within the hour. And I will not have that on my conscience. They stared at each other, chest to chest, breathing hard. The air between them crackled with electricity. It was rage, yes, but beneath the rage was something else, hot, magnetic, and terrifying. Dante looked at her flushed face, the fire in her eyes, and felt a surge of admiration he did not want to feel. She stood up to him. No one stood up to him. Before either of them could say another word, the world went black. The overhead lights died instantly. The hum of the refrigerator cut out. The city lights outside the window seemed to lurch closer as the interior of the penthouse plunged into absolute darkness. "Sophia!" Maya gasped, spinning around in the dark. "Stay where you are," Dante commanded instantly. His voice was a calm anchor in the blackness. A second later, the emergency backup system kicked in. Amber floodlights along the floorboards flickered to life, bathing the penthouse in a dim, golden twilight. It cast long, strange shadows across the furniture, turning the modern apartment into something resembling a cave. "Rocco!" Dante barked into the gloom. "Status!" Rocco's voice came over the intercom, crackly and distorted. "We lost main power. Boss, it looks like a cyber attack on the building's grid. They are trying to flush the security systems. We are switching to manual locks. We are secure, but we are blind on the cameras." Dante cursed under his breath. He reached out and found Maya's arm in the half-light. His grip was firm, reassuring. "Go to Sophia," he said quietly. "I have to check the exits. Do not leave the main room." Maya nodded, though he likely could not see it, and pulled away, rushing toward the hallway. Dante spent the next 20 minutes securing the perimeter. He moved through the shadows with a gun in his hand, checking the heavy steel bolts on the doors, ensuring the service elevator was locked down. The penthouse was a fortress, even without power, but the darkness made the threat feel visceral. Hale was testing the fences. He was poking the bear to see where it would bleed. When Dante returned to the living room, the scene that greeted him stopped him in his tracks. Maya and Sophia were huddled together on the plush rug in the center of the room. They had built a makeshift fort out of sofa cushions and blankets. A single tactical flashlight, which Maya must have found in the emergency kit, was propped up in the center, casting a cone of light upward like a campfire. Dante holstered his weapon and stood in the shadows, watching them. "It is okay. Sweetie," Maya was saying softly, stroking Sophia's hair. "It is just like camping. Remember when we wanted to go to the state park? Now we do not even have to drive." Sophia was clutching a stuffed bear, looking small and frightened in the amber gloom. "But why did the lights go out? Mommy, is the bad man trying to get in?" Maya hesitated. Dante saw her struggle for a lie, but she settled on a softer truth. "The lights went out because the building is tired," Maya said, "and Mr. Marino is making sure no one gets in. He's very good at keeping people safe." Sophia looked up at the ceiling. "He looks like a superhero in my drawing, but he never smiles." "He smiles on the inside," Maya lied smoothly. "Now, close your eyes. I will tell you the story about the brave rabbit who outsmarted the fox." Dante leaned against the wall, hidden by the darkness. He felt a lump in his throat. He had not been anyone's protector in a long time, not like this. He was a boss, a commander, a scary story people told their enemies. But to this little girl, he was the barrier between the dark and the light. It was a responsibility that weighed heavier than any business deal. He waited until Sophia's breathing evened out and her grip on the bear loosened. Maya carefully extricated herself from the blanket fort. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, and turned to find Dante watching her. She jumped slightly, then exhaled. "She is asleep," Maya whispered. Dante nodded. He walked toward the kitchen, the amber floor lights casting his face in sharp relief. "Come," he said softly. "You need a drink." Maya followed him. The kitchen was shadowed, the stainless steel appliances dull in the emergency lighting. Dante found a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. He poured a generous amount into each, the liquid amber matching the strange light in the room. He slid a glass across the marble island to her. "To the brave rabbit." Dante murmured, raising his glass. Maya managed a weak smile. She took the glass and took a large swallow. The alcohol burned pleasantly on its way down, settling her frayed nerves. "I am sorry I yelled at you," Maya said quietly, staring into her drink. "I know you are trying to help. It is just seeing that email, realizing I was nothing to them." "You are not nothing," Dante said. He leaned his hips against the counter, crossing his ankles. "You were useful. In my world, being useful is the highest compliment. In yours, I suppose it is an insult. It is when you are being used to hurt someone," Maya said. She looked up at him. The dim light softened the hard angles of his face. He looked younger, less like a kingpin and more like a man who was simply exhausted. "You said you wanted to be a mechanic," Maya said suddenly. Remembering the conversation from the drive, Dante swirled his drink. "I did. My father had a shop in Queens. I grew up with grease under my fingernails. I loved it. You can fix a car. If an engine is broken, you take it apart. You find the bad valve. You replace it, and it runs. It is honest." "What happened?" Maya asked. "My father was a good mechanic, but a bad gambler," Dante said, his voice devoid of self-pity. "He borrowed money from the wrong people. When he could not pay, they came for the shop. I was 19. I went to the man who held the debt and made him a counter-offer. I told him I would work it off. And did you?" "I worked it off in 6 months," Dante said. "But by then, I turned out to be better at collecting debts than fixing engines. And once you are in, you are in." He took a sip of his bourbon, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "What about you?" Dante asked. "Why law?" Maya traced the rim of her glass. "I wanted to be a public defender. I grew up in a neighborhood where people got arrested for being poor. I wanted to be the person standing between them and the system. So how did you end up at Sterling and Vance helping corporations merge? Student loans," Maya admitted with a bitter laugh. "And medical bills for my mom before she passed. Principals are expensive." "Dante, Sterling and Vance offered me a salary that meant I could feed Sophia and pay the rent without panicking every month. I sold out." "You did what you had to do to survive," Dante said firmly. "That is not selling out. That is being a parent." The emotional honesty hung in the air between them, thick and heavy. The power outage had stripped away the distractions. There were no emails, no phone calls, no societal roles. Just a man and a woman standing in the dark, admitting that life had taken them places they never intended to go. Maya reached out to take his empty glass to refill it. As her hand moved, her fingers brushed against his where they rested on the countertop. She froze. The contact was electric. It was a jolt that went straight from her fingertips to her core. Dante did not pull away. Instead, he turned his hand over, his fingers curling briefly around hers, capturing them. His thumb moved instinctively, tracing the delicate bones on the back of her hand. His skin was rough, calloused, warm. Maya looked up, her breath catching in her throat. Dante was watching her, his eyes dark and intense, searching her face for a sign to stop. He did not find one. Dante took a half step forward, moving into her personal space. He gently cornered her against the marble counter. He was not menacing. He was careful, almost hesitant, but the sheer size of him was overwhelming. His chest was inches from hers. She could feel the heat radiating off him. "Dante," Maya whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I know," Dante said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. "I know I should walk away. I know you are under my protection. I know I am the last person you should want." He raised his hand, the one that had been holding hers, and brought it up to her face. His knuckles grazed her cheekbone, a touch so light it made her shiver. "I have not let myself want anything for myself in a long time," Dante confessed, his voice rough with vulnerability. "I just take what I need to survive. But this—" He looked at her lips, then back to her eyes. "I want this." Maya felt her resolve shattering. The logic that told her he was a criminal, that this was dangerous, that this was insane, it all melted under the heat of his gaze. She saw the loneliness in him that matched her own. She did not back away. Instead, her hands moved of their own accord, reaching out to bunch in the fabric of his black shirt, pulling him closer. Dante made a sound low in his throat, a growl of surrender. He closed the remaining distance. His palm cupped her jaw, tilting her head back, and his mouth crashed down on hers. It was not a tentative first kiss. It was sudden and hungry, a collision of pent-up adrenaline and desire. Dante kissed her like he was starving, like she was the first breath of air he had taken in years. His other hand swept down to the small of her back, pressing her firmly against him, flattening her body against the hard wall of his chest. Maya gasped against his mouth, opening to him. She tasted the bourbon and the desperation on his tongue. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him down. The stubble on his jaw grazed her skin, a friction that sent sparks racing down her spine. For a moment, there was no contract, no hail, no danger. There was just the dim amber light, the quiet hum of the generator, and the overwhelming, undeniable reality of him. He was solid and real, and he made her feel alive in a way the safe, sterile world of corporate law never had. Dante groaned, his grip on her waist tightening, lifting her slightly so she was pressed even closer to the heat of him. The kiss deepened, becoming a rhythmic, urgent dance. Maya felt her knees go weak, her body molding to his as if they were made to fit together. Then, a sound cut through the haze, a small shifting of cushions from the living room. Sophia turning over in her sleep, the reality of their situation crashed back in like a bucket of ice water. Maya pulled back, gasping for air, her eyes wide. She put her hands on Dante's chest and pushed, not hard, but enough. Dante stopped instantly. He froze, his breathing ragged, his forehead resting against hers for a fleeting second before he stepped back. Maya stared at him, her lips swollen, her chest heaving. She looked toward the living room where her daughter lay sleeping, then back at the mafia boss she had just kissed with abandon. The guilt washed over her. He was danger, he was violence, and she was a mother. "I can't," she whispered, her voice trembling. I can't do this. Sophia is right there." Dante straightened up. He ran a hand through his hair, his expression shifting from passion back to the masked discipline he wore like armor. He adjusted his shirt, his jaw tight. He looked at her, and the longing in his eyes was quickly replaced by a wall of steel. "You are right," Dante said. His voice was rough, but controlled. It was a mistake. Maya wrapped her arms around herself, missing his warmth instantly and hating herself for it. "I am sorry. It is just... everything is too much." Dante nodded stiffly. He stepped back further, putting the island between them, reestablishing the physical boundary. "We will keep things professional." "Miss Collins," Dante said formally, "you are here to help me decipher the contract. I am here to keep you alive. That is the arrangement." He turned away, picking up the bottle of bourbon. "Go get some sleep. Maya, I will take the first watch." Maya nodded, tears pricking her eyes again. She turned and walked back toward the blanket fort in the living room, leaving Dante alone in the kitchen shadows. But as she lay down next to Sophia, pulling the blanket up to her chin, she could still feel the phantom pressure of his hand on her back and the taste of him on her lips. And she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that keeping things professional was going to be the hardest thing she had ever done. The siege around Dante Marino's life was tightening, not with the loud bang of gunfire, but with the quiet, suffocating pressure of surveillance. The FBI had been circling the Hale Group's financial maneuvers for months, and the botched contract signing had been the blood in the water they needed. Maya Collins found this out in the frozen foods aisle of a grocery store 3 blocks from the tower. Dante had allowed her this brief excursion, flanked by 2 of his grim-faced security guards, to buy specific asthma medication for Sophia that the penthouse first aid kit lacked. While one guard checked the perimeter of the dairy section and the other stood by the automatic doors. A man in a nondescript beige coat appeared beside her, pretending to inspect a bag of frozen peas. "Do not look at me, Miss Collins," the man said. His voice was professional, flat, and terrifyingly calm. I am Agent Miller with the FBI. We know you are staying in the Marino penthouse." Maya's hand froze on the handle of the freezer door. She stared straight ahead, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I am being held for my own protection," Maya whispered, clutching the medication box. "You are harboring a known fugitive and aiding a criminal enterprise." Miller corrected her coolly. "We have evidence that your signature is on 3 preliminary drafts of the Hale contract. We can paint you as a victim, Maya, or we can paint you as the inside woman who helped orchestrate a $50 million laundering scheme." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. They were threatening her. "What do you want?" she hissed. "We want Hale," Miller said, "but we want Marino more. He is the big fish. We know there is a meeting scheduled between Marino's legal proxies and Hale's representatives tomorrow to discuss a settlement. We want you to wear a wire." "I can't," Maya breathed. "He will kill me. He will get you killed eventually anyway," Miller countered. "If you help us, we put you and Sophia in witness protection. New names, a house in Oregon, total immunity. If you say no, we indict you alongside him. Think about your daughter, Maya. You have 24 hours to decide." The agent walked away before the guards could notice, leaving Maya standing in the cold aisle, shivering from more than just the temperature of the freezers. When Maya returned to the penthouse, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the cold fear gripping her chest. In the living room, Dante Marino, the man the FBI wanted to bury in a federal supermax, was sitting on the floor. His suit jacket was discarded, his tie loosened, and he was frowning deeply at a 3rd-grade math workbook. Sophia was perched on his knee, chewing on the end of a pencil, looking equally frustrated. "I do not understand why we have to group the apples," Dante muttered, staring at the problem with the same intensity he used to analyze shipping manifests. 7 groups of 4 is just 28. Why do we have to draw circles?" "Because Mrs. Gable said so," Sophia insisted, poking his chest with her finger. "You have to show your work." "Sir." Dante looked up as Maya entered. For a split second, his face was unguarded, open and undeniably handsome in a way that made Maya's breath catch. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a father trying to solve a puzzle for a child who trusted him. "Mom," Sophia chirped. "Sir is bad at math." "I am excellent at math," Dante corrected, feigning offense as he shifted Sophia to a more comfortable position. "I am just bad at drawing apples." Maya forced a smile, hiding the trembling of her hands by gripping her purse strap. The domesticity of the scene tore her apart. She had seen the way Dante looked at Sophia, with a fierce, protective softness that he showed to no one else. How could she betray him? But then she remembered Agent Miller's words. "We can paint you as the inside woman. If she went to prison, Sophia would go to foster care. That was the nightmare she could not survive." "I got the medicine," Maya said, her voice sounding thin to her own ears. Dante studied her, his eyes narrowing slightly as he picked up on her distress. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Maya lied, "just tired." Dante watched her walk down the hall. He knew fear when he saw it. He assumed it was the stress of the lockdown, the fear of Hale. He did not know it was the fear of him. Later that night, the fragile peace of the penthouse shattered. Dante had gone out to inspect one of his warehouses in the shipyard district. He had received a tip that a shipment of electronics was being diverted, a sign that his control over his lieutenants was slipping. He had gone expecting a confrontation, and he had found one. It was past 2 a.m. when he returned. Maya was awake, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of cold tea, unable to sleep with the FBI's ultimatum ringing in her head. She heard the heavy thud of the front door, then a low curse. She got up and followed the sound to the master bathroom. Dante was standing by the sink, his shirt stripped off and thrown on the floor. The left side of his torso was a map of old scars and fresh violence. A deep, jagged gash ran down his upper arm, bleeding sluggishly. He was trying to wrap a bandage around it one-handed, his teeth gritted in pain, sweat beading on his forehead. "Oh my God," Maya gasped from the doorway. Dante flinched, spinning around. His eyes were wild for a second before he recognized her. He slumped slightly against the marble counter. Go back to bed. Maya, he rasped. It is not as bad as it looks. It looks like you need stitches, Maya said, her shock replaced by an instinct to help. She stepped into the bathroom, the bright lights reflecting off the white tiles and the red blood. Let me see. I said leave it, Dante snapped, pulling his arm away. Sit down, Dante, Maya ordered, her voice surprisingly firm. You are bleeding on the floor. Dante looked at her. He saw the stubborn set of her jaw, the same look she had when she argued about contract clauses. He was too tired to fight her. With a heavy sigh, he sat on the edge of the large bathtub. Maya grabbed the first aid kit from under the sink. Her hands were shaking as she opened it, but she forced them to steady. She washed her hands, put on gloves, and knelt between his legs. This is going to hurt, she whispered, uncapping the antiseptic. Dante did not flinch when she cleaned the wound, though his abdominal muscles contracted sharply, a ripple of tension under his skin. Maya tried to focus solely on the injury, but the intimacy of the moment was overwhelming. She was touching him. Her fingers brushed against the hard muscle of his bicep, the heat of his skin radiating through her gloves. She could smell the metallic tang of blood, mixed with the scent of rain and the musk of his skin. He was watching her. She could feel his gaze on the top of her head. Why do you stay? Dante asked quietly. His voice was rough, barely audible over the sound of the running faucet. Maya paused, the needle and thread hovering over his skin. I do not have a choice. You told me that yourself. You always have a choice, Dante said. You could have run today at the store. My guards are good, but you are smart. You could have shouted for help. Maya looked up. Their faces were inches apart. She saw the exhaustion in his dark eyes, the loneliness that mirrored her own. I trust you more than I trust them, Maya admitted softly. And that scares me. Dante let out a breath that sounded like a groan. He reached out with his uninjured hand, his fingers, rough and stained with the grime of the warehouse, closed over her hand that held the antiseptic. He guided her hand away from the wound, pressing it flat against his chest, right over his heart. She could feel it beating, heavy, steady, rhythmic, a drumbeat of life in a world of death. I am not a good man. Maya, Dante whispered, his thumb caressing the back of her hand. I have done things that would make you sick. I am losing control of my city. My own men are taking bribes from Hale. I know, Maya said. I am planning a way out, Dante confessed. The words tumbled out, a secret he had not shared even with Frank. Once this is over, once Hale is down, I am liquidating the assets. I am taking the money and I am disappearing. I want a life where I do not have to bleed in a bathroom at 2 a.m. Maya stared at him, stunned. You are leaving? I want to, he said. He leaned forward. The movement was slow, giving her every chance to pull away. But Maya did not move. She was paralyzed by the raw need in his eyes. Dante tilted his head and kissed her. It was different from the first time. The first kiss had been a collision. This was a possession. His lips moved over hers with a slow, deliberate heat that melted her bones. He tasted of danger and promise. Maya made a soft sound in her throat. She dropped the antiseptic bottle. It clattered on the tiles. Forgotten. She stripped off the gloves and reached for him, her hands sliding up his bare chest, feeling the scars, the hard ridges of muscle. Dante groaned into her mouth. He stood up, pulling her with him, backing her gently until her spine hit the cool, tiled wall. He pressed his body against hers, trapping her. His uninjured arm slid around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The friction of his bare skin against her thin pajamas set her nerves on fire. His hand tangled in her hair, tilting her head back to deepen the kiss. His tongue swept into her mouth, claiming her. Maya felt herself drowning in him. For a moment, she forgot the FBI. She forgot Hale. She forgot that he was a criminal and she was a lawyer. She only knew that he was warm, and she was cold, and she wanted to be closer. Dante's hand slid down to her hip, his thumb digging in possessively. His breathing was harsh in her ear. Maya! He growled against her neck, pressing a hot, wet kiss to the pulse point under her jaw. The sound of her name, spoken with such desperate want, snapped a chord of reality in Maya's mind. Sophia, If she let this happen, if she let herself fall for him completely, she would never be able to save her daughter. The FBI agent's face flashed in her mind. 24 hours? No, Maya gasped. Pulling back, she placed her hands on his chest, pushing him away. Dante, stop. Dante froze instantly. His body was rigid with tension, his chest heaving. He looked at her, his eyes black with dilated pupils. I can't, Maya whispered, tears springing to her eyes. I need time. I cannot. Everything is too complicated. Dante stared at her for a long, agonizing heartbeat. Then, slowly, the fire in his eyes died down, replaced by a mask of resignation. He stepped back, giving her space. Time, Dante repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. Of course. He turned back to the mirror, picking up the needle she had dropped. Go to sleep. Maya, I can finish the stitching myself. The next morning, the sun rose over Harbor City, but it brought no warmth. Maya had made her decision. It felt like swallowing glass. She called Agent Miller from a burner phone Dante's team had overlooked. She agreed to the wire. Her logic was desperate and flawed. She told herself she would use the wire to catch Hale admitting to the fraud. She would give the FBI Hale, and then she would find a way to destroy the evidence against Dante. She convinced herself she could play both sides and save everyone. It was a naive hope. At noon, Maya was scheduled to meet with a representative from the Hale Group at a coffee shop, a preliminary peace talk arranged by Dante's legal team, which she was attending as a proxy. She dressed in the guest suite, her fingers trembling as she taped the small, flat recording device to the underside of her bra, just as Miller had instructed. The wire ran down her side, taped to her ribs. She put on a loose blouse and a blazer. She looked in the mirror. She looked like a lawyer. She felt like a traitor. When she walked out into the living room, Dante was waiting. He was dressed in a pristine black suit, his injured arm stiff at his side. He looked impeccable, powerful, and utterly alone. My team will be just outside the coffee shop, Dante said, handing her a file. You go in, you listen to their offer, you agree to nothing, you bring the terms back to me. Do you understand? I understand, Maya said. Her voice was steady, but her heart was beating so hard she thought the microphone taped to her chest would pick it up. Dante looked at her. He reached out and straightened her collar, his knuckles brushing her neck. The touch burned. Be careful, Dante said. Softy. I will, Maya whispered. She turned to leave. Wait, a voice said from the hallway. It was Rocco, the head of security. He was holding a handheld wand, a signal detector, standard protocol. Boss, Rocco said apologetically. New rules since the breach. We scan everyone leaving the secure zone, even Miss Collins. Maya's blood turned to ice. No, she said too quickly. We are late. We have to go. Dante frowned. He looked at Maya's pale face. Then he looked at Rocco. Scanner, Dante ordered. Maya stepped back. Dante, please, I'm on your side. Then you have nothing to worry about, Dante said, his voice dropping a few degrees. Rocco stepped forward and swept the wand over Maya. When it passed over her torso, the device shrieked, a high-pitched electronic squeal that echoed through the silent penthouse. The silence that followed was louder than the noise. Dante stared at the wand. Then he looked at Maya. The betrayal in his eyes was not explosive. It was a crumbling of something vital. It was the look of a man who had finally allowed himself to believe in something, only to have it proven wrong. Where is it? Dante asked. His voice was dead. Dante, let me explain, Maya pleaded, tears spilling over. They threatened Sophia, the FBI. They said they would take her away. Where is it? Dante roared, the sound shaking the glass walls. He crossed the distance between them in a blur of motion. He did not hit her. He grabbed the lapels of her blazer and ripped it open. He saw the wire taped to her blouse. With a snarl of disgust, he reached in and tore the device from her clothing. The tape ripped against her skin, stinging, but the pain in her chest was far worse. He threw the small black device onto the floor and crushed it under the heel of his boot. You used me, Dante said. He was breathing hard, his face twisted in a mixture of fury and agony. I let you into my home. I let you near my heart, and you wear a wire to sell me out? I was trying to save you, Maya sobbed. I was going to use it against Hale. Liar, Dante spat. You were saving yourself. He stepped back from her, looking at her as if she were a stranger, as if the moments in the kitchen, the balcony, the bathroom had never happened. Dante, please, Maya begged, reaching for him. Do not touch me, Dante warned, his voice like liquid nitrogen. He turned to Rocco. Take her back to the guest suite, lock the door, and put a separate guard on the girl. Maya froze. No, please, Dante, do not separate us. She is a leverage point, Dante said coldly. And you have proven you cannot be trusted with leverage. From now on, you do not see Sophia without my permission. Dante? Get her out of my sight, Dante shouted. Turning his back on her, Rocco grabbed Maya's arm and dragged her away. She was screaming Dante's name, begging him to listen, but he did not turn around. He stood staring out the window at the gray city, his injured arm throbbing, his heart hardening back into stone. 2 days passed in silence. Maya was a prisoner in the guest suite. She was allowed to see Sophia for 1 hour a day, supervised by 2 guards the rest of the time. She sat on the bed, staring at the wall, drowning in regret. Dante did not come to see her. He slept in his office. He stopped doing math homework. He stopped looking at the drawing of the Sir with suit. But while the penthouse was frozen in a cold war, the city below was burning. Victor Hale had made his move. Using the confusion and the internal dissent within Dante's organization, Hale had bribed 3 of Dante's key captains. They had promised to deliver Dante to a neutral location for a final negotiation. The trap was set at the old container docks in Sector 4. It was isolated, dark, and perfect for an execution. Frank, Dante's consigliere, brought the message to the office where Dante was drinking his 3rd scotch of the morning. Hale wants a sit-down, Frank said nervously. Tonight, at the docks. He says he is willing to drop the contract dispute if you agree to cede the transport routes. It is a trap, Dante said flatly. Of course it is, Frank agreed, but if you do not go, you look weak. The captains are watching. If you show fear, the organization collapses. Dante looked at the glass in his hand. He thought about the wire. He thought about the FBI closing in. He thought about Maya, locked in the other room, who had tried to destroy him to save her daughter. He realized he did not care about the Empire anymore, but he did care about ensuring that Hale did not win. Set it up, Dante said, slamming the glass down. We go tonight. He would walk into the trap, but he would not walk in unarmed, and he would not walk in expecting to survive. He would take Hale down with him, and in doing so, he would buy Maya and Sophia the freedom he could no longer give them himself. The silence in the penthouse was heavier than the steel beams that held the building together. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room, leaving Maya Collins gasping for breath in the center of the guest suite. 20 minutes ago, the door had opened and Rocco had entered, not with a tray of food, but with a travel bag. He had been grim, avoiding her eyes as he told her the news. Sophia was leaving. Dante had arranged it. He had sent his most trusted lieutenant, a man named Vinny, who had 3 daughters of his own, to take Sophia to a safe house 2 hours north of the city. It was a fortress in the countryside, unlisted, untraceable, and far away from the crosshairs that Victor Hale had painted on the Merino Tower. Maya had screamed. She had clawed at the door. She had begged to speak to Dante, but the order had been absolute. Sophia had been told it was a vacation, a special trip to a farm with horses. She had waved goodbye to Maya on a video call, her smile painfully bright, unaware that her mother was collapsing on the floor of a gilded cage. Now, Maya sat on the edge of the bed, her hands gripping the sheets until her knuckles turned white. The separation felt like a physical amputation. She was alone, truly alone, and the worst part was the gnawing, cold realization that Dante had done the right thing. He had removed the leverage. He had saved Sophia from the fallout, but he had left Maya behind. In the silence, Maya's phone, the burner she had hidden in the lining of her suitcase, vibrated against her leg. She stared at it. It was Agent Miller. She answered. her voice a hollow shell. "They took her," Maya whispered. "She is gone. We know." Miller's voice came through, crisp and devoid of sympathy. "We tracked the vehicle. The girl is safe for now, but that does not change your situation, Maya. My situation is that I am locked in a room and the man I was supposed to spy on hates me," Maya snapped, anger flaring through her grief. "The wire is gone. The deal is off. Leave me alone." "You do not get to quit," Miller said sharply. "We just decrypted a new set of emails from the Hale server. You need to listen to me very carefully. Victor Hale never intended to let you walk away from this. We found a draft press release and a set of affidavits prepared for the moment the contract was signed." Maya froze. "What are you talking about?" "The narrative was already written," Miller explained. "Hale was going to frame you as the mastermind, the diligent attorney who seduced the mob boss and masterminded the laundering scheme to pay off her debts. He has a paper trail linking your student loans to offshore accounts he set up in your name. If Dante falls, you go down for 20 years. If Dante survives, Hale kills you to tie up the loose end. You are a dead woman walking—" "Miss Collins, unless you help us end this tonight." The line went dead. Maya lowered the phone. The room seemed to spin. She had thought she was a pawn, but she was not. She was the scapegoat. Hale had built a coffin for her before she even stepped into that conference room. A cold, hard resolve settled in her chest, displacing the grief. She was done crying. She was done waiting for men to decide her fate. If she was going to go down, she was going to go down fighting. 5 miles away, the air smelled of rust and stagnant water. Dante Marino stood in the center of a derelict warehouse in the industrial district. The meeting was supposed to be a preliminary peace talk with 2 of the captains who had been wavering. It was a test of loyalty. It was also an ambush. The first shot rang out from the catwalks above before a word was spoken. "Get down," Rocco roared, shoving Dante behind a stack of rotting shipping pallets. Bullets chewed up the concrete floor, sending geysers of dust and stone chips into the air. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Dante drew his weapon. His movements fluid and practiced, but the angle was bad. They were pinned down. "Hale does not want a deal," Dante shouted over the deafening crack of automatic fire. "He wants a massacre." He leaned out to return fire, spotting a muzzle flash in the shadows of the rusted machinery. He squeezed the trigger twice, silencing the shooter, but a searing pain ripped through his side. Dante grunted, stumbling back. He pressed a hand to his ribs. His fingers came away wet and red. "Boss!" Rocco yelled, laying down cover fire. "Move," Dante ordered, ignoring the burning agony in his side. "To the car, now." They moved like a single organism, a phalanx of discipline against the chaotic violence of Hale's mercenaries. They fought their way to the rear exit, bursting out into the cool night air where the armored SUV was waiting. Dante threw himself into the back seat, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the vehicle screeched away, tires smoking, in the safety of the car. Dante leaned his head back against the leather seat. He checked the wound. It was a graze, deep and bloody, but it had missed the vital organs. He tied his handkerchief tight around his waist, his face a mask of grim determination. "This ends tonight," Dante said, his voice low and dangerous. "No more talks, no more strategy. Hale wants a war? I will give him a war." Back at the penthouse, the security rotation had shifted. With the high alert at the warehouse, the guard outside Maya's door had been reduced to a single man, and he was currently distracted by the squawking radio reports of the ambush. Maya did not waste the opportunity. She had watched the keypad code a dozen times. She waited until the guard walked down the hall to speak into his radio. Then she slipped out. She did not run for the elevator. She ran for the one place she knew the answers lay, Dante's private office. The heavy oak door was locked, but Maya had learned a trick or two from her ex-boyfriend who had been a locksmith, and the lock on the office was designed to keep out brute force, not finesse. It took her 3 agonizing minutes with a tension wrench fashioned from a hair clip, but the tumbler finally clicked. She slipped inside and locked the door behind her. The room was dark, lit only by the city lights. Maya rushed to the desk. She woke the computer. It was password protected, of course. "Think," she whispered to herself. She tried his birthday. Incorrect. She tried the company founding date. Incorrect. Then, her eyes fell on the drawing sitting on the corner of the desk, weighted down by a heavy crystal tumbler. Sir with suit. She typed in Sophia. Access denied. She bit her lip. She typed in check it again. The screen unlocked. Maya let out a sob of relief. She worked fast, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She did not look for financial records. She looked for the surveillance archives. Dante recorded everything in his office, every meeting, every conversation. She found the audio files from the initial contract meeting. She found the encrypted logs of his private investigation into Hale. She dragged everything onto a cloud drive she shared with Agent Miller. She was just hitting send on the final packet when the door handle twisted violently. Then, a heavy thud as a shoulder slammed against the wood. The lock splintered. The door flew open, crashing against the wall. Dante stood in the doorway. He looked like a demon rising from hell. His suit was torn. His shirt was stained with fresh blood at the waist, and his eyes were burning with a terrifying, homicidal rage. He saw her behind his desk. He saw the computer active. "Get away from there," Dante roared. He crossed the room before she could move. He did not care about his wound. He grabbed her by the arms and slammed her back against the heavy wooden desk, pinning her there with his body. "You just do not stop." "Do you?" Dante snarled, his face inches from hers. He was shaking with adrenaline and fury. "I sent your daughter to safety. I took a bullet tonight and I come back to find you stealing from me? Again?" He looked at the screen, seeing the file transfer. "Who are you sending that to? Hale? The feds?" Maya did not flinch, though the heat of his anger was scorching. She looked up at him, seeing the blood on his shirt, the exhaustion in his lines, and the heartbreak buried deep in his rage. "I am sending it to Miller," she cried out. "To the FBI!" Dante's grip tightened, bruising her arms. "You traitorous—" "Listen to me," Maya shouted, shoving against his chest. "Hale framed me. He set up accounts in my name. If you go down, I go down with you. He was never going to let me live." Dante froze. The words hung in the air between them. "What?" he breathed. "He planned it from the start." Maya sobbed, the tears finally spilling over. "I am the fall guy. Dante, I am the mastermind on paper. I had to do something. I could not just wait for you to die." Dante stared at her. He saw the truth in her eyes. It was raw and terrified and desperate. "So you steal my files? You give me to the FBI? I gave them Hale," Maya yelled back, her voice breaking. "I gave them the proof that he orchestrated the fraud. I told Miller I would give him you, but I lied. I am trying to save us." She grabbed the lapels of his ruined jacket, shaking him. "I am trying to save you because I love you. You idiot." The silence that followed was deafening. Dante stared at her. His chest was heaving. The adrenaline from the ambush, the pain from the gunshot, the fear of losing everything, it all collided with her words. "I love you." The anger in his eyes shattered. It didn't disappear. It transmuted into something else entirely, something hot and urgent and undeniable. "You—" Dante started, his voice rough. "I never meant to," Maya whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But I do, and I am not going to let him kill you." Dante let out a sound that was half groan, half growl. He didn't speak. He just crashed his mouth down onto hers. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't the tentative exploration of the kitchen. It was a storm. It was fear and relief, and fury and desire all mixed into a single, desperate action. Dante kissed her like he wanted to devour her, like he needed to breathe her in to keep his heart beating. Maya gasped, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. She tasted the metallic tang of blood on his lip and the salt of her own tears. Dante's hands slid down her back, gripping her waist. He lifted her effortlessly, sitting her on the edge of the desk, sweeping the paperwork and the keyboard onto the floor with a crash. He stepped between her legs, pressing his body flush against hers, needing the contact, needing to feel that she was real and she was there. He winced as his wounded side pressed against her, a hiss of pain escaping him, but he did not stop. "Dante, your arm, your side." Maya gasped against his mouth, her hands fluttering over his chest, trying to be careful. "I do not care." Dante growled against her neck, his hands roaming over her, possessive and claiming. "I do not care about any of it." He kissed the line of her throat, his stubble grazing her sensitive skin, making her arch back with a shudder. It was a collision of two people who had been dancing on the edge of a cliff for weeks, finally deciding to jump together. It was messy and urgent, a frantic reaffirmation of life in the face of death. For a minute, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only the heat of his skin, the strength of his arms, and the desperate rhythm of their breathing. Then, Dante pulled back. He rested his forehead against hers, his breath coming in harsh, ragged pants. His eyes were dark, blown wide, searching her face. "We cannot do this," Dante whispered, his voice sounding wrecked. "Not now. Not while he is still out there. If I start, I will not be able to stop. And I need to be sharp." Maya nodded, breathless, her hands still clutching his shoulders. I know. Dante stepped back, creating a sliver of space. He ran a hand over his face, trying to regain the composure that had been stripped away. He looked at the computer screen, then at her. "You said you have a plan?" Dante asked, his voice steadying. Maya took a deep breath. She smoothed her hair, trying to think like a lawyer again. "I sent Miller the files," she said, "but they are not enough to arrest Hale yet. We need a confession. We need him to admit it on tape." Dante nodded slowly. "He wants a meeting. He thinks he has me cornered." "He does," Maya said. "He thinks you are weak. He thinks you are desperate. So we use that." She reached out and took Dante's hand. "We give him exactly what he wants. You agree to the meeting at the docks. You agree to sign everything over. You bring the real contract, the one with the trap clauses, and you bring a recording device." "I will be walking into a firing squad," Dante said grimly. "No," Maya said, her eyes fierce. "You will be walking into a trap that we have already sprung. Because while you keep him talking, I will be in the van with Miller. And the second Hale admits to the scheme, the FBI moves in." Dante looked at her. He saw the steel in her spine. She was not just a signature machine. She was a partner. "And if it goes wrong?" Dante asked. "Then we go down together," Maya said. Dante looked at her for a long moment. Then he brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "Okay," he said. "We finish this." The next few hours were a blur of calculated chaos. Dante contacted Hale's people. He played the part of the defeated king perfectly. He sounded tired, broken. He agreed to the meeting at midnight at the main cargo terminal. He demanded that Maya be brought along to finalize the legalities, knowing Hale would agree because it put all his loose ends in one kill box. But Hale was arrogant. He believed he had won. A leak planted by one of Dante's loyal men confirmed that Hale was bringing a full crew. He was coming heavy. He planned to force Dante to sign a revised contract on camera, a suicide note of a business deal, and then put a bullet in his head. The night air at the docks was thick with the smell of brine and diesel. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with clouds. Dante's armored SUV sat idling in the shadow of a crane, a mile away from the meeting point. Inside, the tension was palpable. Maya sat in the passenger seat. She was wearing a bulletproof vest under her coat. Dante sat in the driver's seat, checking his weapon one last time. "You stay in the van with Miller," Dante said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You do not come out until the area is secure." "I will be right there," Maya said, "watching everything." Dante turned to her. In the dim light of the dashboard, his features were sharp, beautiful, and terrifyingly calm. He reached out and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. He leaned in until their foreheads touched. "When this is over," Dante whispered, "I am holding you to that confession." Maya closed her eyes, leaning into him. "You better come back to me, Dante Marino, or I will never forgive you. I will come back," he promised. He squeezed her hand one last time, then let go. The meeting spot was a clearing between two massive walls of shipping containers. It was illuminated by harsh, industrial floodlights that turned everything stark white and pitch black. The FBI surveillance van was parked 300 yards away, hidden behind a stack of rusted machinery. Inside, Maya sat next to Agent Miller, staring at the bank of monitors, Her headset was on. She could hear Dante's breathing. On the screen, a lone figure walked out of the darkness. Dante walked with a slow, deliberate gait. He held a briefcase in one hand. His other hand was empty, held away from his body to show he wasn't reaching for a weapon. He looked small against the towering cranes, a single man walking into the throat of the beast. Ahead of him, standing in front of a line of black sedans, was Victor Hale. He was surrounded by 6 armed men. Hale was smiling. It was the smile of a shark that smells blood in the water. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She watched the screen, her hands gripping the edge of the console. "Check the audio." Miller ordered the technician. "We are green," the tech replied. "We have Marino's mic loud and clear, on the monitor." Dante stopped 10 feet from Hale. "You look terrible." "Dante." Hale's voice crackled through the speakers. "Rough night, let us just get this done." "Victor." Dante's voice came back. "Calm and steady. I brought the papers." Maya held her breath. He was stepping straight into danger, unprotected, armed only with a recording device and the desperate hope that a little girl's warning had given them enough time to change the ending of the story. Dante set the briefcase down. He looked up at Hale, and even through the grainy black and white video, Maya could see the fire in his eyes. "One signature," Dante said, "and then it is all yours." Maya watched as Hale stepped forward, the trap closing shut. "Sign it," Hale said. Dante reached for the latch of the briefcase, and the final game began. The floodlights cut through the darkness of the Harbor City docks like surgical knives, bleaching the color out of everything they touched. The air tasted of salt and diesel fumes, a heavy, chemical tang that sat in the back of the throat. Dante Marino stood alone in the center of the concrete expanse, the black water of the bay churning silently behind him. 10 yards away, Victor Hale stood flanked by his personal guard. The rival crime lord looked victorious, his expensive coat billowing in the wind, his face twisted into a smirk of absolute triumph. He held a document in his hand, a new contract, simpler and far more brutal than the first. "Sign it," Hale shouted over the wind. "Sign over the logistics routes, the warehouses, and the waterfront property. Do it now, and I let you walk away." Dante looked at the document. He knew what was in it. It was a complete surrender, a suicide note for his empire. "And if I do not?" Dante asked, his voice steady, carrying clearly to the directional microphone taped to his chest beneath his shirt. Hale laughed, a dry, barking sound. "Then you die here," Hale said. "And the woman? The little girl? My men will find them. Accidents happen. Dante, fires start, brakes fail. You know how this works." Dante's jaw tightened. The threat against Sophia and Maya sent a spike of adrenaline through him, but he forced his face to remain impassive. He needed more. He needed the confession on tape. He reached out and took the clipboard from Hale. He patted his pockets, pretending to search for a pen. Hale impatiently shoved a gold fountain pen into his hand. Dante looked down at the paper. He tapped the pen against the clip, stalling. He brought his hand up to his ear, feigning a scratch, and pressed the small receiver in his ear canal. "We are in position," Agent Miller's voice crackled, tiny and tinny in Dante's ear. "Get him to admit the fraud." Dante looked up at Hale, putting on a mask of defeat. "You won." "Victor," Dante said, his shoulders slumping. "You outplayed me. I just want to know one thing before I sign." Hale raised an eyebrow, checking his watch. "Make it fast." "The first contract," Dante said. "The one with the shell companies. The Hale Global Holdings. How did you get it past my legal team? My lawyers are the best in the city." Hale stepped closer, his ego swelling under the spotlight. He could not resist the urge to gloat over a fallen king. "Your lawyers?" Hale scoffed. "I bought your lawyers 3 months ago." "Dante. Henderson and his partners have been on my payroll since the summer. They wrote the arbitration clauses exactly how I told them to." Dante nodded slowly, as if digesting the betrayal. "And the girl? Miss Collins?" Hale sneered. "The junior associate? She was the perfect patsy. Clean record, desperate for money, single mother. If you had signed that first deal, the FBI would have traced the fraud right back to her signature. We even set up offshore accounts in her name. She would have gone to prison for 20 years, and I would have walked away with your company." Dante's hand tightened on the pen. The rage was a physical thing, a hot coal in his chest. Hale had planned to destroy an innocent woman's life just to facilitate a business takeover. "You thought of everything," Dante said quietly. "I always do," Hale replied, tapping the signature line on the clipboard. "Now sign. Before I lose my patience and decide to visit that safe house in the country." Dante looked at the signature line. He looked at the water. In his mind, he heard a small voice. A voice that had saved his life once and was about to save his soul now. "Sir, check it again," Dante smiled. It was a cold, sharp expression that made Hale's smile falter. "You know, Victor," Dante said, his voice loud and clear. "A little girl once told me to read the fine print. Best advice I ever got." "What?" Hale asked, confused. Dante locked eyes with him. "She told me things did not match," Dante said. "And you are right, they do not." With a sudden, violent motion, Dante threw the gold pen over his shoulder. It arced through the light and splashed into the dark harbor water. At the same time, he tugged sharply on his left sleeve. "Now," Dante roared. The command unleashed hell. From the shadows of the shipping containers, a dozen blinding lights flared to life. FBI agents in tactical gear swarmed from behind the machinery, their weapons drawn. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Panic erupted among Hale's men. They were mercenaries, loyal only to the paycheck, but instinct took over. One of them raised an assault rifle, and a gunshot cracked through the air. The docks exploded into chaos. Dante dove behind a concrete barrier as bullets chipped away the stone inches from his head. He drew his own weapon, returning fire, taking down the shooter on his right. In the surveillance van 300 yards away, Maya Collins screamed. "No," she cried, watching the monitor as muzzle flashes lit up the screen. "He's trapped." "Stay here," Agent Miller shouted, grabbing her arm. "We have teams moving in." "I can't," Maya yelled. She wrenched her arm free. She did not think. She did not consider the danger. She only saw the man she loved pinned down by gunfire. She kicked open the van door and sprinted into the night. "Maya!" Miller shouted behind her, but she was already gone. She ran toward the floodlights, her heart pounding in her throat. The noise was deafening. Shouts, sirens, the pop, pop, pop of gunfire. She reached the edge of the container yard just as Dante was trying to move from his cover to flank Hale. A gunman on top of a container saw him. He took aim. "Dante!" Maya screamed, her voice tearing through the cacophony. Dante spun around. He saw her running toward him, exposed, terrified, and utterly reckless. "Get down!" Dante bellowed. He abandoned his cover, sprinting across the open ground. He tackled her just as bullets kicked up sparks on the pavement where she had been standing a second before. They hit the ground hard, Dante rolling them until they were behind a heavy steel crate. He pinned her to the ground, shielding her body with his own. His breathing was ragged, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and relief. "Are you insane?" Dante shouted, looking down at her. "I told you to stay in the van. I'm not leaving you," Maya shouted back, grabbing his lapels. "Not this time." Dante looked at her face, streaked with tears and grime. He wanted to shake her. He wanted to kiss her. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice breaking. "Do not move." Suddenly, a shadow loomed over them. Victor Hale, desperate and cornered, had circled around the crate. He held a silver pistol, his face pale and sweating. "Stand up," Hale hissed. Dante froze. He slowly lifted his hands, stepping away from Maya, placing himself between the gun and the woman. "It is over, Victor," Dante said calmly. "Look around. The FBI has the perimeter. They have your confession on tape. You are done." Hale's eyes darted around. He saw his men being handcuffed. He saw the agents advancing. He was a rat in a trap, and he was going to bite. "I am not going to prison," Hale spat. "And if I go down, you are coming with me." He raised the gun, aiming not at Dante, but at Maya, who was still on the ground. Dante's blood went cold. "No!" Dante shouted. He stepped forward, hands raised high. "Victor, listen to me," Dante said, his voice dropping to a hypnotic, persuasive cadence. "The recording. You admitted to the fraud. That is white-collar crime. You do 5 years in minimum security. You play tennis. You write a book. But you pull that trigger? You kill a civilian in front of federal agents? That is life without parole. That is dying in a concrete box. Think about the money. Victor, you can still fight the fraud charges. You cannot fight a murder charge. Hale hesitated. The logic pierced through his panic. He lowered the gun slightly, wavering. Dante took a slow step closer. Do you remember Clause 84? Dante asked softly. The one you tried to bury? Hale blinked, distracted. What? The asset forfeiture, Dante said. You missed a comma. Hale glanced down, an instinctive reflex to check the details, the habit of a man who obsessed over contracts. It was the split second Dante needed. Take the shot, Dante yelled. A sharp crack echoed from the crane tower above. An FBI sniper fired. The bullet struck Hale's hand, shattering the pistol grip. Hale screamed, clutching his wrist as the gun clattered to the ground. FBI! Don't move! Agents swarmed in, tackling Hale to the pavement. Dante let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for a lifetime. He slumped against the crate, the adrenaline crashing out of his system. Maya scrambled up from the ground. She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. You are okay, she sobbed. You are okay. Dante wrapped his good arm around her, holding her tight, resting his chin on the top of her head. He looked at the chaos around them, at Hale being dragged away in handcuffs, at the flashing lights of the police cruisers. It is over, Dante whispered into her hair. It is finally over. 2 hours later, the adrenaline had faded, replaced by the cold reality of the law. Dante sat in a holding room at the federal building. His hands were cuffed to the table. His lawyer, Frank, sat beside him, looking tired but relieved. The door opened. Maya walked in. She looked exhausted, her coat torn, but her eyes were clear. They let me have 5 minutes, she said. Dante looked at her. I'm sorry you had to see that. Maya sat down across from him. She reached out and covered his cuffed hands with hers. Is it true? She asked. What the agents said. Frank answered for him. We cut a deal, Miss Collins. Dante provided the recordings, the documents, and the testimony to put Hale away for racketeering, fraud, and attempted murder. In exchange, the federal prosecutor has agreed to drop the RICO charges against Dante's organization. And Dante? Maya asked. Looking only at him, Dante met her gaze. I plead guilty to 1 count of conspiracy. I serve 18 months, maybe 12 with good behavior. When I get out, I am on probation for 5 years. No contact with known felons. No business in the shipping industry. Maya squeezed his hands. 18 months? It is a gift, Dante said seriously. For a man with my past, it is a miracle. Maya nodded, tears welling in her eyes. We can wait. Sophia and we can wait for 18 months. Dante's heart clenched. You do not have to. You are free. Maya, you can go anywhere. I am not going anywhere, she said fiercely. You saved us. You checked the contract. Dante smiled, a genuine, tired smile. I had a good advisor, he said. 3 weeks later, the courtroom was packed. Victor Hale sat at the defense table, looking diminished in a prison jumpsuit. But the star of the show was not the mob boss or the FBI agents. It was Sophia Collins. She sat in the witness chair, her legs not quite touching the floor, wearing her best Sunday dress. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair, smiled kindly at her. Sophia, honey, can you tell the court what you saw that day in the office? The prosecutor asked gently. Sophia adjusted her glasses. She looked at Dante, who was sitting in the back of the courtroom in his own jumpsuit. She waved at him. He nodded back, a lump in his throat. I saw the bird, Sophia said clearly into the microphone. On the first page, the bird looked left. On the last page, the bird looked right, and the letters were different, so I told Sir to check it again. A ripple of laughter went through the courtroom. Even the stenographer smiled. And what did Mr. Marino do? The prosecutor asked. He checked it, Sophia said proudly, and then he threw the bad paper away. The judge looked down at her notes. She looked at the massive file of evidence, the shell companies, the billion-dollar fraud, the hitmen, all unraveled because an 8-year-old girl liked to draw birds. Let the record show, the judge said, her voice warm. that the witness's observation was the catalyst for this entire investigation. You have very sharp eyes. Miss Collins. Hale was sentenced to 30 years. Dante's plea deal was accepted. As bailiffs led Dante away to begin his sentence, he looked back. Maya was holding Sophia's hand. They were both smiling through tears. He knew then that he could survive a concrete box because he knew what was waiting for him on the outside. 14 months later, the seasons had changed. The snow had melted, giving way to a lush, green spring. Dante Marino walked out of the heavy iron gates of the correctional facility. He wore a simple pair of jeans and a white t-shirt. He carried a duffel bag. He looked different. The weight of the empire was gone from his shoulders. He was just a man. A car was waiting, a sensible sedan, not an armored SUV. Maya stood by the hood. She wore a yellow sundress that caught the sunlight. Sophia, taller now, missing a front tooth, ran toward him. "Sir," she screamed. Dante dropped his bag. He caught her, swinging her around, burying his face in her shoulder. "Hello." "Little bird," he rasped. Maya walked up to them. She looked beautiful. She looked happy. "Welcome home," she whispered. Dante put Sophia down and pulled Maya into his arms. He kissed her. Right there in the parking lot, oblivious to the guards on the towers. It was a kiss of freedom. Life was different now. Quieter. Dante used the money he had legally sequestered to start a security consulting firm. He helped companies find holes in their systems before the bad guys did. It was honest work. Maya had left Sterling and Vance and opened a small practice in a storefront, handling family law and tenant disputes. They were not rich, but they slept at night. They lived in a townhouse in a quiet neighborhood with trees and sidewalks. One evening, Dante came home late from a consultation. The house was warm, smelling of basil and tomato sauce. He walked into the living room. Sophia was asleep on the couch, her mouth slightly open, a crayon still clutched in her hand. On her chest lay a drawing. Dante picked it up gently. It was a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands, a man, a woman, and a girl. They were standing in front of a house. The sun was smiling. He felt his chest tighten. He walked into the kitchen. Maya was stirring a pot on the stove. The soft light of the lamp cast a golden glow over her. She turned as he entered, her face lighting up. "Hey," she said softly. "You are late." "Traffic," Dante said. He walked over to her. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. He breathed her in. She smelled of home. "We have scars," Dante said quietly, looking at the faint white line on his arm where the bullet had grazed him. Maya put her hand over his. "We do, but they are healing." Dante turned her around. He looked at her face. The woman who had stood by him when the world fell apart. The woman who had run into gunfire for him. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. He did not do it with fanfare. He simply knelt on the linoleum floor of their modest kitchen. Maya gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Dante opened the box. Inside was a simple diamond ring, clean and bright. "Maya," Dante said, his voice thick with emotion, "I do not have an empire anymore. I do not have a penthouse in the sky. All I have is this house, this job, and a promise that I will spend every day trying to be the man you deserve." He looked up at her, his dark eyes shining. "I want to build a real life with you, a lawful life. I want to be the one who checks under the bed for monsters for Sophia. I want to be your husband." Maya looked down at him. Tears streamed down her face, but she was laughing. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Dante. 1,000 times yes." He stood up and slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He pulled her close, kissing her deeply. A slow, intense burn that poured all the longing of the last 2 years into a single moment. From the hallway, a sleepy voice murmured, "Mom, sir?" They broke apart, smiling. Sophia was standing there, rubbing her eyes, looking at the ring on Maya's hand. She squinted at it, then she walked over, grabbed Maya's hand and inspected the ring closely. She looked at the diamond. She looked at Dante. "It is shiny," Sophia declared. Dante laughed, picking her up. "Is it approved?" Dante asked. Sophia nodded solemnly. Then she grinned. a gap-toothed smile that lit up the room. "But maybe," she whispered, leaning into his ear. "You should check it again." Dante laughed, holding his two girls close, knowing he would never need to check anything again. He had everything he needed right here. Thank you so much for reading this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Dante, Maya, and little Sophia. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below and tell me your country. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more emotional and exciting tales. I can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments.